things are getting better is not the same as we can stop working. Things are getting better and we need to work twice as hard. We are emitting less today per person than we were emitting 10 years ago.
All right. Hi, my name is Averie Gannon, and I am with Claudio Piani today to talk about a kind of climate touch base of where we are now. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. And do you mind just quickly introducing yourself, discussing some of the research and work you do really quickly?
Sure. My name is Claudio Piani. I'm a climate scientist. I got my PhD in the States, in Seattle, doing oceanography and aerodynamics in the tropics. I looked at really deep thunderstorms, equatorial thunderstorms. Then I moved to Oxford University, where I looked at the ozone hole, the ozone layer. And then I moved to climate, and I moved to the International Center for Theoretical Physics, which is under the umbrella of the United Nations in Italy. And then I've been working at AUP for the last 12 years.
How did those jumps feel coming from ozone into climate scientists, things like that?
Well, it's really hard to justify why someone would be really interested in one topic, one environmental topic, and not in the other. I never met someone who says, I'm really into ozone, but I don't care at all about global warming. And it's also has to do, the pleasure of where you work or the research you do or the activity you do has to do a lot with the group and people you interact with. So, climate scientists are a type.
Okay.
So, and if you're in that group, it's fun, it's great work, it's great collaboration, and there's also this idea that you're sort of trying to contribute to finding solutions to arguably one of the biggest challenges of our time.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, with your qualified experience, can you give me a sort of where are we now with everything that's been going on?
So it's a period of transition. It's a period of change, and it's a time when over the last 10 years I've become cautiously optimistic. So just to throw around some facts that maybe not everyone is aware of: emissions are dropping in most developed countries.
What do you define developed country in that way?
Rich countries.
Okay,
countries
I see.
with money. So
okay.
Europe, the States, Australia, Japan, emissions, and I'm talking about CO2 emissions. The amount of garbage we pump in the atmosphere is decreasing. In other places, it's going up. As a globe, it's starting to plateau. We are emitting less today per person than we were emitting 10 years ago.
Okay.
There's still a lot of work to done, but whereas maybe up to 10 years ago, and certainly when I started 30 years ago, there were nightmare scenarios out there. There were ideas, we could not exclude that temperatures would go up by 6 degrees, which is 6 degrees means large swaths of the planet are uninhabitable.
Okay.
Instability in the ice sheets in Greenland, Antarctica, sea levels rising by...
Where should we be with degrees then, as far as that goes?
So of course that's a complicated question. But again, so you can, I'll give you three answers. Answer number one: if all countries maintain the pledges that they've already agreed to, and the policies they've already put in place, not the pledges, but the policies they put in place, will land somewhere between 2.5 and 3.
Okay.
Which is not good. We want to do better than that. If countries maintain the pledges they've made for the reductions of carbon expected for 2030, we should land 1/10 of a degree better, so 2.4 to 2.9. If countries maintain, a lot of countries have sort of have presented zero carbon emissions by the mid-century, by 2050.
I have heard that, yeah.
Which is really, really ambitious. Then we could stay at just above 1.5. Now, no one believes we're going to stick to 1.5.
Okay.
But it is not unfathomable that we might land at 2 or just slightly bigger. And the really important thing to say is it really matters if we manage to do 2.3 instead of 2.4 or 1.9 instead of 2. Every 1/10 of a degree is important and
it's all a
deserves
step towards
fighting
a good
for.
progress.
It makes a difference, and we need to sort of fight or labor for every 1/10 of a degree.
Okay. Then let me ask you this. If you are in discussions with different people, whether they have a science background or not, how are you approaching these conversations? I know that there's this big kind of difference between someone that might be a fatalist about the climate or skeptic or maybe a catastrophist. Like, how are you defining those as different? How are you approaching those conversations?
So depends what the setting is.
Okay.
So let's just assume the conversation is one-to-one at a bar.
Sure.
So there's no public.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
So the most and what are you trying to achieve? If you're just trying to bully someone, then go ahead, bully away. But what you're trying to do is first never trivialize their position. Most people you talk to don't know much about climate, as I don't. Like I'm an expert in my field, but if you ask me, what are the sustainability prospects for a certain coral reef, I have no idea. I would have to go research it. So people are as ignorant or more as you are, which means they don't know a lot. And that's a first change in your stance. And respect what they think and just suggest places where they might get information that they trust. Suggest places where they might get information that they trust.
Would you recommend any off the dome right now?
Well, let's start by saying not social media.
Okay. Yeah.
Not social media. The second thing, and this might surprise you, not daily papers. Daily papers are not reflective pieces. They are sensationalists. They are, they're attention grabbing. That's not where you go to get your climate knowledge. So any kind of, governmental website or reflection pieces or any kind of periodical that has a 2-week or 1 month sort of production cycle might make more sense. There are also websites, like my favorite is Our World in Data, run by Dr. Hannah Ritchie, which is a beautiful website. And almost any climatic or environmental problem that you have, the website starts with the data. It starts there. And then you can start with your reflective pieces, but it starts with the numbers.
Okay, I see. So then in between these conversations with people that might be on an extreme end of the spectrum when it comes to these sort of like do or die mentality, how are you approaching that?
So the do or die is always the do or die is always counterproductive. Like you have people who say, there's nothing we can do. We're going for a 6-degree change, and no matter what we do, the future is apocalyptic. And that's a person that you need to bring down from the ledge. It's not apocalyptic, and especially because you should not feel that you no longer have moral responsibilities to this. So we do have a moral responsibility. The apocalyptic scenario is not helping to that. And the other side that thinks, that it's all a conspiracy.
Okay.
And, conspiracy brought about by China to hurt, U.S. labor. This is a sentence.
Right. Well, that usually gets grouped into a larger group of just skeptics, but that's not always the case with what a skeptic might be.
Right. Yeah. And also, like the grouping is also a problem. So there's a false dichotomy. There is no, do you believe it's true or do you think it's fake? That's not a real dichotomy. And also, we make a mistake. It is counterproductive to associate your stance on climate with your political allegiance. And whatever part of, and also political allegiance is really not a dichotomy. There's a whole spectrum.
Yeah.
But also people that it would surprise you to think, there's many right-wing people are absolutely worried about climate. They might be or ecological issues. They might not think climate change is a big problem, but they certainly believe that smog and pollution in city and air smog in the airways is a big problem. And so they would also be happy to reduce the use of CO2, but also they're interested in renewables just to decrease the dependency on oil and other kind of sort of issues. But
do you have anything to say to people that are kind of on the complete other end of the spectrum? They may hear you say things like, we're plateauing with our emissions. We, might be going down, things like that. And then they go, okay, I can just take a breath. Like, it's not really my problem anymore.
Right. So things are getting better is not the same as we can stop working. Things are getting better and we need to work twice as hard because they're not good enough. But things are getting better, but they're nowhere near good enough. And as I said before, we can land on 3. We can land on 2.5. Those are drastically different scenarios.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2.5. So 3 versus 2.5 might. accelerate the speed with which ice sheets are becoming unstable. You could have increased melting. 3 versus 2.5 might increase the frequency of heat waves in tropical countries, which can't bear that kind of climate impact.
Okay.
So it does make a huge difference.
Okay. And then to kind of pivot, you are a professor at my university. I'm a student here as well. And obviously you've been teaching for a long time. Is there a certain sort of like bias you see with students, or is there some sort of like preset standard that they hold very dear and you kind of either have to correct it or build off of it? How does it feel working with like younger people?
The first thing you have to do with younger people is point them towards data. Like whatever position you hold a position which is an allegiance, not a position. So move away from that. If you were thinking, if you're all out believing that there's an extinction coming, then move away from that and look at the data.
Okay.
If you think climate change is just a conspiracy, move away from that, look at the data. That's the first thing I do with students. In particular in this university, you have a very rich sort of cultural mix in the classroom. So that's always something you want to bring to the fore.
Okay. And do you notice with that that diversity that we have within this school, do you still see common trends of what students say or believe? And do you engage with them? Do you just disengage completely?
Well, the most common trend I would say is that by now, no one is denying climate change per se. That's gone away.
Yeah.
The 20 years ago, you still had people saying, well, I don't think this is real. Even fossil fuel companies now agree climate change is occurring. They might disagree on what to do to fight it or how big the tax on fossil fuels should be, but they all agree that it's occurring.
Okay, yeah. I'll get a little anecdotal. When I was in high school, I went to high school in a very small town, just outside of Washington, D.C., and the kind of discussions that were had about climate were very varied. A lot of kids came in and had the same, ideas that a lot of the university students do have, but there was a few where their logic behind climate change is not real nor a problem. It's because either my parents have said it or I read it on this place.
Sure.
And just not willing to have an argument. How do you approach that? Have you seen that with students as well?
So when some students are defensive. As you were talking about Washington D.C., I'm trying to think what part of that is close to coal country. So there must be a whole part that's extremely defensive. If your livelihood depends on whether or not climate change is real, there's no discussion.
You're completely right. I live 10 minutes from a coal train that would go up through Maryland.
Right. So if your job depends on that, you will be a climate skeptic, and there's nothing anyone can do. And so what you can do there is try to reassure people and say how the energy transition will not affect your livelihood, or there are other opportunities come out. In fact, the alternative energy sector is producing huge job opportunities.
Okay, yeah.
There's a whole other sort of issue and discussion on that.
Okay. So then if you bring it back to an individual, whether it is a student or just a person or someone in your life that they're coming to you and saying, hey, I want to improve. I want to do what I can.
Right.
What do you advise? There's some ways that are better than others, I assume.
Yeah. So there are some classic basic things, which is, turn down the heating in the winter.
Sure.
You can do fine at 18 degrees. You don't need to be at 22 at the home. And that's Celsius, by the way, just so we agree. There's no Fahrenheit here. Use minimal air conditioning in the summer. Take public transportation. My son's in Japan. My daughter's in Switzerland. My mom and dad are in Rome, and my wife's in Copenhagen. So I have to fly.
Multicultural, multi-geographic. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to fly. But there's other things I don't have to do. And so, for example, one thing I don't do is I don't eat red meat.
What's the science on that? I don't actually either. So what's the science on that?
You just have to, in terms of cost of CO2 per calorie, a calorie in red meat will be 1,000 times more CO2 emitting than a calorie from grain or vegetables. And it really, and if you don't, and by all means, don't demonize people who eat red meat. You like eating red meat, you have to do that.
It's the same with the climate bullying. You can't
don't
make that,
demonize anyway. But just the change from picking one day where you don't eat red meat but you eat chicken, or 2 days a week, will make a huge difference. So small changes. No one has to become a vegan. No one has to become vegetarian. Just reduce your intake.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. And that's proven to work.
Huge.
Okay.
Huge difference from if there's one change, then do that. And also there's other things that don't really make that big a deal. So, you want to take your canvas bag to the grocery shop. That's great. But if you fill it with red meat,
okay, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
As we kind of wrap up here and we're nearing the end, do you have any sort of final thoughts for anyone who might be listening to this? Either, first time kind of listener. I know it's a very introductory sort of talk about the climate, but anything you'd advise?
If you're a first time listener and you're 20 years old, your future will be electric, will be solar, will be wind. Solar has become 20 years ago, solar was more expensive than carbon. 6 years ago, it was a lot less. It's decreased in 6 years, it decreased by 90%.
Okay.
And it's still decreasing. So your future will be solar and wind.
Okay. That's something I can look forward to as a student.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
30 years from now, your electricity will be much more decarbonized than it is now.
Well, I feel like that's great to hear. I feel like that's a good thing and
yeah.
something to sort of build up to, and young people can make that impact and help out.
It doesn't mean we have, and I foresee this because I expect we will keep on working harder and harder.
Okay. You think there won't be a cool down, take a breath, relax kind of moment?
There shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't think there will be.
Okay, that's good. I mean, that's good to hear. Obviously, I'm young. That would be a nice thing to know that that's something I can help with.
That's that's the trust I have in your generation.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure.
Today. It really has.
So much.
Thank you so much.